Hello and welcome back to the What the Falk Sunderland preview show. We are pushing out podcasts like pups this week as Sunderland play every 3 days over the Christmas period. But we all do love a little bit of festive football. However, it does come to an end on Monday as Preston North End become our first foot at the Stadium of Light. And I have returning guest, as always, Preston fan, former Preston writer, journalist, an all-round good guy, Tom. Tom, how are you doing? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, mate. Are you?
Yeah. I actually forgot how many times you've been on the podcast. I feel like this might be 7.
Yeah, a handful. Even going back to doing it for a bit of Fleetwood as well.
Oh God,
Back
yeah,
in
so you did.
League One days. So
we'll not talk about that.
yeah.
First and foremost, I think, we do this, like I say, podcast often. But I always feel like when I chat to you, Preston are 10th or 11th. And lo and behold, I looked this morning and I'm like, Preston are 11th. So you lost at home to Chef Wed yesterday. It sounds worse than it is. Chef Wed are actually on a really good run of form, but however you look at it, it's a disappointing result in the same vein that us not beating Rotherham's a disappointing result. But how was the performance? Was it a deserved defeat, and how did you perform?
I mean, there were parts that were okay. Sheffield Wednesday did a bit of a job on North End. North End just didn't create anything substantial, didn't really adapt very much to the game. And I think, kind of like you say, really, any way you spin it, when you've got, with all respect to Sheffield Wednesday, if they're 23rd in the league, you're expecting to beat them, especially if you're around the playoffs and you're hoping to try and make the top 6. You just have to beat teams like that. However you do it, however you find a way, you just have to get it over the line. And North End didn't. And that in itself is obviously a disappointing result in isolation, but you couple that with the fact that the form over the last, I think it's about 16 games, has been pretty dismal. It all kind of comes together into kind of a bit of a bad mix, really.
I normally look at like the last 5 games, but look, I don't know what it is with Preston. They're actually a really interesting team to look at statistically because it's mental every time. Last year you had 40 0-0 draws and then a couple of 1-0 wins. But I've looked over the Christmas period results, and I think it probably sums Preston up in many ways. So I've looked at the last 8 games because it's kind of interesting, but as you'll probably attest to, it's gone back a bit longer. You've won 2, you've drew 1, you've lost 5, but it's when you look at the actual results, it's bizarre. You lost 5-1 at home to Watford, then you beat Leeds 2-1, you lost 2-0 at home to QPR, you lost 4-0 away to Middlesbrough, and you won 3-1 away to Huddersfield. There's no rhyme, no reason in there or any kind of semblance of consistency. So can you give us a bit of an overview of why the sort of past few months have been so inconsistent?
Yeah, it's difficult to kind of put it down to one thing. I think a lot of the blame, certainly from the sort of fans' point of view, is falling on the manager. Obviously you went back 8 games. If you go back 18, North End have taken just 16 points from 18 games, which obviously just isn't good enough. It's very strange. I think certain players have kind of come out of form at the wrong time, but yeah, the consistency has often been an issue at North End. They used to be quite patchy. Generally, they didn't start the season too well, but in these last few years they have. They've kind of come good towards the middle and then tail off at the end. It's kind of been the other way around lately. They've started quite well, had an okay-ish start of the new year, and then either side of that, they've kind of been a bit poor and generally do fade away towards the end of the season. In terms of what is causing the inconsistency, it's so difficult to say. Goals are difficult at times, as is the case with a lot of clubs, especially clubs that can't spend loads of money like North End. Unless you've got an established goal scorer in your side that is going to get you 15, 20 goals, you are going to struggle and you're going to have these sorts of spells. I think it's more than just that, though. Again, I'm trying not to just put it all on the manager, and I know that a lot of fans will think that it is the manager. The style isn't really working. They're just not creating. They're not looking as solid as they used to. So, yeah, I think some of those results, Leeds, obviously, they went down to 10 men, which helps. Huddersfield aren't the greatest of sides in the division. So I think it's not necessarily that they're inconsistent. I think they just come up against teams kind of at the right time. I just don't think there's a great deal going for North End at the moment on their current form.
Funny when you were talking about if you don't have a 10, 15 goal striker, you're going to go through funny patches. Like every Sunderland fan there's going, is you talking about us or Preston?
Yes.
At that point. I do want to touch on the manager, but before I do, I think you touched on the start of Preston's campaign, where obviously we played each other's second game, and I think we did play well, but talking of strikers, we didn't have one that day, and you sort of did in Will Keane, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. But I looked at the first 7 games of the campaign because I was like, I'm sure they were top at one point, and you won 6 of your first 7. You're basically top of the table until you get beat 4-1 off West Brom on September the 30th at home. Then it goes completely south. Why were Preston so good at the start of the season, and what changes? Is it just confidence?
Yeah, well, I think they did really well in the summer. The business that they did kind of worked really well for how they wanted to play. So Ryan Lowe last season wanted to play a 3-4-2-1 oftentimes with kind of 2 number 10s, but he didn't really have the number 10s for it. They were more centre midfielders playing higher up, so it was quite industrial and it was quite, rely a lot on hard work, and they weren't really creating a lot of chances. And they brought in the likes of Mas Frockyar, Dwayne Holmes, and it also freed up Alan Brown a little bit with a proper focal point, especially early on in the season in Will Keane. And it just all sort of worked. And I wonder whether teams, having played against North End's 3-4-2-1 in the past, weren't quite ready for the new-ish version with the different pieces in there, the players that are more kind of genuine number 10s. And then I wonder maybe they've been found out a little bit and they're able to kind of shackle them. Liam Miller's been in great form lately, but against Sheffield Wednesday, they just doubled up on him. And for whatever reason, he didn't get moved. He didn't go to the right. He didn't come central. He wasn't really allowed to wander to kind of evade this extra attention he was getting. So that really shut down North End's main creative threat, really, especially when Mas Frockyar isn't on the pitch, who is struggling to get a run of games, but looks one of the most genuinely talented players that North End have had for some time. I'm not sure if it was the Sunderland game at home where he's nutmegged someone on the touchline and come inside and scored. He's got something there, but Ryan Lowe's not happy with his defensive work and little bits like that. And I think it's dented his confidence. So he comes on looking a little bit weak. So I wonder whether they've got found out a little bit, and without players like Frockyar in there who are able to drop a shoulder and create something, and the same with Miller, but he's getting doubled up on, I think it's difficult for North End to sort of find a way to win sometimes. And you obviously mentioned the West Brom, the wins and stuff was before coming up against Leicester, who are obviously very good, and Ipswich and people like that. Southampton not long after. So they played good teams not long after that run. But I do also think potentially tactically they've been found out a little bit.
Yeah, because that one after West Brom, I think, was like Leicester away, Ipswich at home, or Ipswich away or something, and then Southampton a couple of games after. So, probably really disappointing from a Preston perspective, though, that you have such a good start and then you come against the teams that you think you might be up against and you get essentially battered and concede lots of goals.
Yeah, they kept the pace early doors with Ipswich and Leicester, and it was looking really impressive. And then obviously North End fall away, and Ipswich and Leicester have kept the pace
so far, until Sunderland go in their fantastic second half of the season run and win the league, of course. We've touched on Ryan Lowe in almost every podcast, and for various reasons. And I think last time we spoke right at the start of the season came just after the end of last season with us playing on the last game. And he'd been like frustrated with certain things, and we talked about it in the last show of last season, last preview show, and then it came to the summer and he said, look, I think things have been sorted out. Obviously he's still there. But you touched on it before, there's going to be questions on the manager because he's been there for a while now. And like in reality, with the greatest respect to Preston, I don't fear Preston any more than I fear Plymouth. And realistically, if he's too good for Plymouth and gone to Preston to improve them, I don't think he's done anything different to what his predecessors have done. But that ultimately will be felt by fans, I think, as well, because it's a results business and he's not getting them at the moment. You kind of touched on the fact that some fans think this may be the end of the road for him. How much pressure is he actually under, though?
Not as much as he is under from the fans. My kind of feeling around it is that, and they released a statement, because I was having these conversations with friends and family about it and stuff like that, saying, is he under pressure? I'm like guessing, like, I think if we lose here, he might go. And I just thought, no, because the club don't really work like that. And then they released a statement over Christmas to say that they're still backing him and they've invested a lot into this management team and stuff like that. which I think grated a lot of fans. That all right, so it's money. That's the reason you're not getting rid. But it is kind of the Preston way almost, that going back to Simon Grayson onwards, which, North End got promoted nearly 10 years ago now. 3 of the 4 managers have stayed for multiple years, where the average time for a manager in a job is 11 months. They're booking the trend quite a lot. They like to give them time, which I do like. I do think it's good that a manager can come in and get the time and kind of set his stall out almost. But yeah, I remember last time we spoke, I told you that he'd lost a section of the fan base. That has only grown. And I think once you lose people, it's very, very, very difficult to win them back. You'd have to probably finish in the playoffs, not just be around it and look like a good side. I think you have to have something to kind of show for it to win those sorts of people back. There's very committed fans that have been fans for a hell of a long time who are done with him. Which is a dangerous position to be in a manager. And as he did last year, he's kind of taken a few swipes at fans. I don't know whether it made it towards kind of Sunderland Twitter, so to speak, but he said the other day that unless fans have kind of got coaching badges that they can't really criticise and stuff like that, which doesn't go down well when you're spending like thousands of pounds a year to follow the team and you're paying good money to watch. You've been kind of told you can't have an opinion. So he doesn't help himself in that respect. He's very different to, obviously Tony Mowbray's been at Sunderland and he's a very experienced manager, and he doesn't get carried away and he plays things down and plays a lot of things with a straight bat, whereas Ryan Lowe is not that way inclined. He will kind of say what he thinks, and he does get a bit defensive at times. And I think that's what it is there. How long he's got. I mean, if you're on a run where you've got 16 points in 18 games, you would think on the pitch that he doesn't have too long. But I don't think North End are in too much of a rush. They're more the type to kind of look at the table and go, well, Peony are in just off the top half. They're a few points off the playoff places. They're not in a bad position. So if you sack your manager in this position, you look a bit crazy, but at the same time, you've got minus 11 goal difference, which is far and away the worst of anyone around you. And if you were to change the manager, you could give them a really good platform to go and build on for the second half of the season to potentially get yourself in a playoff race, because you're already at an advantage over half the league. Whereas if you change them in the summer and you come in, you've got no advantage. So it depends which way you kind of see it. I think the club are more the former, where they're not inclined to change given the league position.
If any manager said that in one of our press conferences, I think they'd have to drag him out by his neck. That's a pretty bad thing to say, because I think I think we both probably agree it's horseshit. We've watched enough football. We don't need to have a certificate to say that. Yeah. At least I think so anyway. People might disagree.
Yeah. And you pay your money. You pay your money. If you're a football fan, it's built off the money of fans and people working and spending that money to go and watch the football. I don't think you should have to have any sort of certificate to say you're able to comment. Whether you take it on board is another thing, but I don't think you need to say it as such.
No, I 100% agree with you on that. Has it got to the point with Ryan Lowe where, look, there's been 2 managers who've managed us both with varying degrees of success, both disliked by Sunderland fans for varying reasons. Has it got to the point yet where people are asking about Alex Neil potentially coming back? Because that's when you know that you're done.
Yeah, no, there's not exactly been many names sort of bandied about, really. I think people have moved on from Alex Neil. I think towards the end of his time at North End, the football got a bit attritional. When he first came in, it was absolutely brilliant. It was so intense. It was playing out from the back, with the high press, and the players just loved it. Towards the end, it was kind of channel balls and going a bit longer, back 3, just a bit more attritional. And obviously, things didn't go great at Stoke after moving there. So, yeah, no one's asking for Alex back at the moment.
Same. Looking at the defence, we've touched on the attacking side of things. Now, this means nothing towards Sunderland because we came up against the worst defence in the league yesterday and looked like we couldn't hit a Bondo with a banjo. But one of the big takes from Preston North End is that your defence is leaky. You've conceded more goals than Sheff Wed, QPR, Huddersfield and Birmingham. You've currently got the fourth worst defence in the league, conceded 42, which is kind of odd because the players look quite similar to what they were last year in ways. And we touched on at the start of the season, start of the podcast, sorry, how you had that really random run of 0-0 draws and 1-0 wins at the start of last season. So you were quite a solid team. The 0-0 draw that we had, we were a little bit toothless up front because it was just as we didn't have a striker. That's still continuing. But that was just at the beginning. But defensively, you were good and hard to get past. So why's that changed? Why's that gone so wrong?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I don't think Freddie Woodman's been in the best of form this season. He got dropped the other day against Swansea, came back in against Sheffield Wednesday, maybe a few question marks at getting beaten at his near post, but he's not a bad goalkeeper overnight. Jordan Storey wasn't in the side against Sheffield Wednesday either, who's normally quite consistently. And Lindsay and Andrew Hughes, I think, are really good defenders for this level. I think the protection has changed slightly. In the past, it's been a kind of a 3-1-4-2 where you've got Ben Whiteman sitting in that holding midfielder role. That's changed to a kind of the 3-4-2-1 leaves you with two sort of orthodox centre midfielders. So they're pushed on a little bit higher and leaving them a bit more exposed. I don't think the left wing back slot is still an issue. Kean Best has come in at the start of the season. He's a really good player, really exciting player, young player, but a bit suspect defensively at times, just can lose his man. And there's been a couple of goals where he's kind of lost his man, which is fine. It's understandable for a young player. But those things obviously tot up and they can make you a little bit weaker. Otherwise, you've got Liam Miller there, who isn't exactly a defensive force. Robbie Brady hasn't been able to stay fit and again has the moments like Kean Best where he can lose his man. But yeah, it's a difficult one. It's not necessarily, you wouldn't look at it and go, this is the reason. Again, kind of for the inconsistency stuff, but it just looks a bit too easy at times. And I think teams can kind of get into that rut where if they're not keeping clean sheets, I mean, they haven't kept a clean sheet at home since I think March, something silly like that. And you get into this rut where you can kind of just let in easy goals. And it's quite hard to stop that. And once you do, obviously the goals can dry up. And start last season, they were making blocks and they were heroic, some of the defending you were seeing. But it's just not that way for North End. Almost like where if you've got a goal scorer in form, they just seem to find ways to score and they just seem to, it can even come off the backside or something like that. It's almost like the opposite with the defence at the moment that, there's one the other day against Cardiff where Dwayne Holmes tries to clear the ball from a corner and his volley somehow cannons back off the player trying to block it and squeezes in at the near post. And you can't really legislate for stuff like that. But then North End go and leave a man completely unmarked 6 yards out for a header, which you can. So it all depends, really. They're not bad players overnight. It is still the same defence, like you say, but it's just all a bit easy at the moment.
I often wonder, and I'm going back to last season, and Sunderland have done it a couple of times, to be honest. But when we won 3-0 at Preston end of last season, as good as we were and as up for it as we were and you had nothing to play for, there was an element of collapse from Preston, as if like they just went, bugger it. And I remember the Preston fans being particularly frustrated with the way that they kind of responded to us going 1-0 up to what was an unbelievable goal. And then you look through this season, there's been 4-0s, 5-1s. At Preston, the kind of side where the heads will drop, and I'm not like having to go at their professionalism, but like confidence plays a big thing in football. And Preston do strike me as the kind of team where if you concede 2 shiny goals, you just collapse a bit.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because Ryan Lowe, I think I saw a stat the other day, his side has conceded 4 goals. I think it's 4 or 5 on more occasions than the last 3 managers combined. So it's very much a trait of his side, because obviously it's not happened in previous managers. Whether it's a confidence thing, I don't know. Whether it's maybe changing tactics to try and come at teams and then getting even more found out. I think at times Ryan Lowe has played for there to be very few goals in the game, whether he's played for a draw or whatever. And once that stops working, if you've no attacking intent, attacking threat in the game, there's only one way it's going to go, especially when you have to try and open up a little bit, but the team isn't suited to that or the tactics aren't suited to that in that moment. It only makes things worse. It's very much an issue and it's very much something, again, that's been flagged by the fans that they shouldn't have to see the side being beaten 5-1 at home. And it's not kind of the first time that they've seen the side be beaten heavily. I mean, when Sunderland beat North End 3-0, Sunderland changed the tactics. I think brought Pritchard on as a number 10, and North End just couldn't get to grips with it at all. So I think adapting to tactical changes is a big issue for North End, and I think once they get unlocked, they very much struggle to kind of get to grips on that and to try and sort of stem the flow, and that's why games can just get taken away from them.
I think one big thing we probably haven't touched on, but I think every fan base and every club will be thinking about it. By the time we play each other, it's 2024. That doesn't mean too much. It's just another day. What it does mean is that the January transfer window's open. I think every Sunderland fans know what's on our transfer wish list: a defensive midfield and a centre forward, please. But what do you think Preston need in January?
I think most teams obviously will want a striker. North End have the numbers. Emil Rees is just coming back, which is nice. Everyone wants a kind of genuine goal scorer. They've got Milutin Osmajic, who's looked okay at times, still settling in. Whether they need them in terms of numbers, I don't know, but everyone wants a new toy, don't they? And everyone wants a new striker. Wing backs are still a big issue. Calvin Ramsey didn't make the bench against Sheffield Wednesday, despite not having probably a recognised genuine right back in the squad. Brad Potts, obviously a former kind of attacking midfielder who is very much a right wing back now. Whether he's an orthodox right back, who knows? But North End have flitted in and out of a back four at times. But Calvin Ramsey still can't get a kick. So wing backs are still an issue. They could do with another wing back on either side, really. I mean, you've got Best and Brady at left wing back. Best is still young. Brady quite injury prone. Liam Miller is a very attacking player, very good on the ball. Not much of a defensive left wing back, so you could maybe need a bit of strength there, and maybe even just a bit of energy anywhere in the pitch, just a bit of raw pace, a bit of creativity that North End have lacked for years, really. Although you kind of get that in with Mas Frocchio, and he doesn't get much of a kick, so it's difficult to kind of say. The squad is quite balanced, really, but definitely full-backs need a bit of help and anything to try and create some sort of spark in North End, which has been the issue for years.
I think when we're looking at a play you touched on there, Brad Potts, Newcastle fan, for those unaware, and a big one, got a big mouth in him as well, like most of them do. But he's at the minute playing as like a right wing back, which is, to my knowledge, when he was at, I think, Barnsley and Carlisle previously, he was sort of a big hulking midfielder, which actually I wouldn't have minded at Sunderland back in the League One days, which I've now mentioned twice, which I'll never ever do again. But he's not a right back. And Calvin Ramsey, who we touched on before, came in from Liverpool, really highly rated at Aberdeen. He's had his injury problems, but from what I read online, there's a potential that he might go back because he hasn't really had a look in. So Brad Potts is in there. I am going to ask you who you're most concerned by, but I know for a fact that Jack Clarke's going to be one of them because it is every single week for obvious reasons. Scored again last night, scored against Hull on Boxing Day. But I look at Jack Clarke coming up against someone who's not really a right back or a right wing back and think, well, that's quite handy. But how's he actually doing at right back? Because I know he got man of the match a few weeks back in that position. Yeah,
so although like from the outside you may not see him as a right back, he is actually quite a good right wing back. He had a massive dip in his confidence. He was, like you say, he was that sort of attacking midfielder. He's played on the wing at one point for North End, but had a massive dip in his confidence, and he was playing pretty rubbish, to be honest. The new manager came in, put him out at right wing back, and one thing you can guarantee from him is he's going to put a shift in. He gets called the racehorse at North End because all he does is just gallop up and down. And he's really endeared himself to the North End fans. He's a really dependable defensive option. His crossing is pretty poor, as was kind of highlighted against Sheffield Wednesday. In the forward areas, he can definitely improve, but he is very dependable. Defensively, I think he got, if he played against someone, I can't remember whether he played or not, but if he did, he obviously got the run around last time, as most North End defenders did, because I think when the front three that you have is on their day, it's very tough for anyone to deal with them. But yeah, generally speaking, he is really dependable. Defensively, he's more of an issue going forward. Obviously, Jack Clarke is a threat, and Patrick Roberts and people like that. It's more, North End can't really deal with players that are able to drop a shoulder and are able to sort of create something out of nothing, which is why Pritchard caused so many problems last time. They're going to be the threats for North End. There's no doubt about it. So any players like that, will concern me. But generally speaking, on the surface, Potts defensively doesn't concern me.
Quite funny you mentioned Pritch there. I had about a 15-minute rant yesterday getting annoyed about why Pritch doesn't play every single week, only for Michael Beale to come out afterwards in his press conference after we'd recorded, saying he's had a chest infection. So sorry, Michael, not my fault. Didn't know, mate. But please play him on New Year's Day. You touched on Patrick Roberts there. He got a muscle injury yesterday, so there's a potential that he'll be missing on New Year's Day. We've touched on Jack Clark because I know that would be the answer to this normally. But who are the players that do concern you from Sunderland's side, and where are we most likely to be able to damage you?
Yeah, it would be sort of those wide areas where last time they just got it really. They were able to isolate the wing backs, and you know, when you've got tricky players and you're able to isolate people, it's exactly what you want. Obviously, Joe Bellingham's taken a lot of headlines. I can't say I know a great deal about him. Sounds a bit crap, really, but I was getting a bit tired of him constantly. Whenever people talk about Sunderland, all they talk about is him, and there's more to any club than one player. But someone with an eye for goal is obviously going to be an issue for any team. But yeah, mainly Clark and obviously if Roberts is fit, or Pritchard if he comes in. Those sorts of players are what North End have been sorely lacking for years. So they're the ones that always get the attention from kind of North End fans because it's what we want to see. And they're generally against North End's team that doesn't have a lot of pace. You know, you look at the midfield, Ali McCann's not exactly quick, but I mean, he's mobile. Ben Whiteman's not very quick. Lindsay's not very quick. Hughes is all right. Story, not very quick. So if you're able to get these kind of players turning or slow them down and speed them up, you know, it causes problems. And these players are all completely capable of doing that, getting half a yard and putting one in the far corner.
Complete pipe dream, and it's not going to happen. But what if we announced Amad Diallo on New Year's Day morning? Would you be concerned?
Yes, as would most of the division. But I think that's some sort of Sunderland fairyland or something. I think at the moment.
Sadly for us, it is. But if you are listening, Amad, you're welcome back. Final question as always, predictions. I haven't had it right for a while. I think I've had 2 right this season. So honestly, like, don't be a betting man and listen to my predictions. Although I did get me Sky Bet right last night, but I cashed out too early, so it doesn't really matter. I'm rambling at this point. I do fancy us to win, but in the same vein, like, as much as things might feel a little bit toxic at Preston North End, it was against Coventry, I'm not going to lie. And last night's performance was really poor, despite being pretty good down at Hull. So I think we need to get on the front foot straight away. And I think you will sit a bit deeper, because I think you'd be more than happy to come away with a draw, which makes it a difficult game, because as soon as the team sits back, we really struggle to break them down because we have no centre forward. So in a really depressing first footing New Year's Day result, I'm going to go for a 0-0. My first ever time I've gone for a 0-0, but I'm always wrong. So lads, if you're feeling confident, ignore everything I've said. But where you seen the result going on Monday?
Yeah. They went to Norwich and played for 0-0 and got it. So I was half thinking 0-0 as well, because they need results, and obviously away to Sunderland, difficult place to go. I also, as you said about getting your Sky right, as soon as Michael Beale was appointed and I saw him coming against Coventry, I took Coventry and that came in. So I don't really rate the manager, if I'm being honest. So I think we're going to start seeing Sunderland going down the league a little bit. So I'll go for 1-0 North End, because they're better away from home than they are at home. They are at home, and they can't keep a clean sheet at home. So hopefully, being away helps them out a little bit and gets a few fans off Ryan Lowe's back for the day, because there'll be less of them and they're further away, and they can get something out of it. But yeah.
It's funny you mentioned that about the manager. Yeah, I think there's many people feel the same way, but hopefully...
Yeah, just seemed like a strange appointment especially, I mean, again, it's the outside, isn't it, looking in, but Tony Mowbray was doing a pretty good job there, was getting, the football was good. You've been in the league 2 years and you're right near the playoffs, which is more than teams that have, North End have been there for 10 years and nearly and haven't made the playoffs. So it's not exactly going terribly. And then Beale just seemed like if you're going to get rid of Mowbray, Beale just seemed like a strange appointment. From the outside, I don't know everything, do I? But it just seemed like a very strange appointment. Whether they put everything on a certain manager in France, who knows? But yeah, I don't know. You will know more on that than I will
No.
on why they went from Mowbray to Beale when Mowbray was doing a decent enough job.
I agree. I'm not going to be revisionist and say that I thought it was the wrong decision to sack Mowbray. I thought it came a bit sooner than I expected, but I don't think it was wrong. But I think if you'd said to me, the question was, does Mowbray go and Michael Beale come in? My answer is a stern and strong and very, very certain no. Whereas if the question was, does Tony Mowbray go and a nice young European manager that might get us on the next level? The answer was definitely a yes, and unfortunately I got the latter, but there'll be many fans that, do understand where you're coming from as well, Tom. But Tom, always nice to catch up, mate, over our depressing football clubs. It's always great fun, isn't it? But thanks for popping on.
No problem at all.